which is exciting because I've read your book and loved it. Do you
Oh,
want
that's
to
good.
do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your novel?
Yeah, absolutely. Andrew James Greig. My first book debut is, oops, where are we? Whirligig, which was longlisted for the CWA New Blood Dagger Award and shortlisted for the McIlvanney Prize this year. So a pretty good start, I think it's safe to say.
Very true. How did it feel being shortlisted for the McIlvanney Prize?
Unreal, to be honest. I knew that my publisher, Claire from Fledgling, had entered me for these two awards, but I didn't really think anything more of it. And then, of course, I started getting these notifications through, especially with the McIlvanney telling me I'd been longlisted, and then I was actually at a garage getting my my Land Rover fixed when I heard I'd been shortlisted. So yeah, I was quite astonished because very very talented authors in that list, and I didn't expect to be one of them, to be honest. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe I was lucky this time, and that people just liked the book.
It was an extremely good shortlist.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah,
of,
absolutely.
of books.
Although I must admit, I've only read one book from that list, which was Francine Toon's Pine, especially as she won. So I appeared on a couple of talk events with her on the internet, and lovely woman. We chatted away quite well, and I enjoyed her book. Yeah, it's a well deserved win. Although I don't envy the judges because they're quite different in style. One's more of a sort of, I don't know, psychological, paranormal, gothic sort of thriller in a way, whereupon mine is a fairly straightforward, if slightly twisted and warped, detective novel.
I read the whole shortlist, and I didn't envy the judges either. I couldn't.
No.
It's very hard to pick a winner.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just pleased to be one of the contenders. That's so I've won already, as far as I'm concerned, to have got that far.
Did you notice a sort of a change in sales?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah. Obviously, I don't get the full details of the sales because the publisher gets those, but I can see on Amazon if things are selling well or not. And yeah, immediately after the shortlisting, my sales figures did go up. I think I got into, I don't know, 120th on the Scottish crime section, something like that. Which I guess probably equates to 5 books a week or something. I'm not quite sure how these figures all work out, being a newbie in the publishing world. But yeah, definite interest. Obviously, you've got as a totally new author, you've got a real problem. There's a huge step you have to climb up for anyone to recognise you. So that was a great boost to me to get on that list. And as you say, a lot of people seem to enjoy the book, which is really gratifying to see.
Yeah. What inspired you to write it? Because it's very unique.
Mm. That's a very difficult question. I've always enjoyed the crime genre. Not that I've read a great deal in it. I must admit, I have to hold my hand up and say I've read a handful of crime authors, and that's all. But I quite like the discipline and the puzzle element of it, whereupon you have a crime, and as a reader myself, I like to try and solve it before the detective does. I think that, yeah, to my mind anyway, that's the attraction of a crime book. Trying to outwit both the perpetrator and the detectives as well. So that gives a certain discipline to how you construct a story and how you write it. So you have to try and put a few teasers in, but not enough that people can catch it. too early, and I think luckily I managed it in this first attempt. But yeah, interesting style of killing people as well. I did fancy that, doing something a little bit unusual.
We've already got a comment on the stream from Patricia Forsyth, who's quite a champion of Scottish authors.
Oh, okay.
She says, "Tell me the book and she will buy it."
Oh, right.
So do you want to just show her your book cover again?
I will. It's called Whirligig. It's published by Fledgling Press. Available in all good booksellers. My name, Andrew James Greig. There you go. That'd be another 50p in my pocket with a bit of luck. Actually, I don't think I get that much, to be honest, but there you go.
Do you not? She also says that now they're being told that Edinburgh Book Festival is moving to Lauriston Place. Will you maybe be there?
I've no idea. No one's been in contact. I'd love to be there. It'd be great to be part of it. I was always I always enjoy going to the book festival in the square with the marquees and everything. It's a great atmosphere, and I'm sure it'll do well at the Edinburgh University. I guess it's all down to COVID again and how that pans out. But I think one of the advantages of them going to Edinburgh is they've got the university has a lot of good film studios and equipment. So if they want to live stream, which I suspect they will anyway, it's a perfect choice of a venue. I think it should do very well. And yeah, I'd love to be. If anyone there from Edinburgh Book Festival, yes, please. Happy to get up and sell my books.
So you've got a killer who, in your book, I'm trying to think of the best way of phrasing this without giving away too many spoilers.
Mm-hmm.
Who kills people in quite a unique way. How much research did you need to do for that book? Because it seems very authentic, and it seems like it would work.
I think it would work. Yeah, I mean, I have an engineering background, more electronics and software, to be honest, than clocks, without giving too much away, clockwork mechanisms. But I've recounted this story before. I've always had an interest in clocks. You might detect from my accent that I'm not native born and bred Scot. I was actually born in London. And one of the things I really enjoyed as a very young boy was going to jumble sales, of which there were many. And the first thing I'd buy is one of these old sit up and beg prams, because you can get an enormous amount of material in one of those. And then I'd fill it up, usually with old clocks, old Victorian clocks, which are great big heavy things, or wind up gramophone players. Any of those things, I had a absolute fascination for these things. And I used to wheel them all home, much to my parents' annoyance, because they all had to be thrown out again, of course. So I was probably an early recycler as they went round and around the jumble cells and back to me. But I loved taking them to bits, getting them to work, or more likely leaving them so they'd never work again. So there's always been an interest in clocks and mechanisms and such like things. So when I had the idea for Whirligig, I wanted the deaths to be done remotely, if you like, so that the guilty party wasn't actually anywhere near the scene of the crime, and that was best done using timing mechanisms. I don't want to give anything else away, but that kind of gave me the whole structure, if you like, for how the story was going to develop, or the modus operandi, I think they say in the writing world, is it?
You've got quite a unique book cover as well.
I love the book cover. I'd suggested, I'll show you again. I suggested it to Claire that what I wanted was a tree. Where are we here? With cogs and wheels in it. And this is what her designer came back with. And yeah, it's very unusual for a crime book. Usually, certainly the ones I've seen, crime books tend to be dark alleyways, or the back of a woman disappearing into darkness, or something like that. They tend to be fairly generic, I think, and I wanted to get away from that if possible. And I really like what she came up with. I've seen a few comments about it. A lot of people like the cover. Some said it looks too literary, whatever that means. But yeah, I like the cover. I think it's great. So very pleased with that.
Yeah, Sam says it's a beautiful cover, or strikingly beautiful.
It is, absolutely. I take my hat off to the designer, whose name escapes me for a second. It'll come back to me before the end of the chat, I'm sure. But yeah, he did a very, very good job. And another thing I'll have to point out to you is chapter headings. Instead of going for 1, 2, 3, 4, he's actually used, and I'll see if I can get that up. He's actually used cogs. So that's chapter 1. And if I can find chapter 2, you'll get the drift. Where are we? Excuse me 1 minute whilst I rattle through. Oh, I went to chapter 3, but there's chapter 3. So the concept is like Roman numerals, really, where he's used different cogs to identify the chapter headings. Makes it very difficult to find a chapter, but it's a very clever idea. So yeah, joint effort between the team at Fledgling Press and myself, really, for the look of the book.
What are you going to work on next?
I've actually written another book with the same cast of characters, so Dieike Storfin and his team, and that's actually sitting with my agent at the moment. So we'll see what pops out. See what pops out from that. But it's obviously a whole new set of problems for the detective and his team to solve. Nothing quite as gruesome. Not so many deaths in this one. I felt there'd be no one left in my little Highland town if I killed people at the rate that the first book did. So I've kept them a bit smaller.
Why did you choose a little Highland town for the setting?
Yeah, good question. I wanted somewhere that I knew. Excuse me, my voice is disappearing already, which isn't good. And when I was a lot younger, I was about 17, 18, I was living in Wales then, in a little town called Monmouth. And I took it into my mind that I'd like to go to Scotland for a while. So I went to the main road, put my thumb out and hitched, which you used to be able to do in those days. Probably just as dangerous then as it was now, but the place I eventually got dropped off at was Fort William. And I stayed there for a few months, got a job with the Forestry Commission, and I wandered up and down the hills and around the banks of Loch Lochy and Loch Long, looking after baby trees. And I've always loved that area, and I have very fond memories of living there and the people there as well. So it's very loosely based on Fort William.
Is there any challenges to sort of setting? Because obviously you've written another book in that series, like you said, you couldn't have as many deaths and things because it is such a small town. What are the other challenges to setting it into like that kind of small enclosed kind of town?
Yeah, I think there are challenges, but there's also advantages. By keeping the geographical locale small, you're limiting the team of players, if you like. You're limiting the options, so you've perhaps got a smaller palette in some ways to describe a story, and maybe it helps you focus in a little bit more on the people and the place, which is kind of where my interest is. I'm interested in what makes people tick and why people do the things they do, as well as my voice lost, as well as a love of nature and the love of the countryside and such like. So by keeping it fairly tightly controlled in terms of locality, at least, it enables me to wax lyrical a little bit whilst I'm writing. So, yeah, more advantages than disadvantages, I think.
So Samantha, one of our other admins, she interviewed you when you were on as part of the McIlvenney list.
Mm-hmm.
She said if you're not into crime, so you said you've not read a lot of other crime things, what do you like to read?
I spent most of my life probably reading science fiction, which doesn't necessarily rule out crime. In fact, there's a recent Chris Brookmyre book I read not that long ago, which was a crime committed on an orbiting space station. I can't remember the name of it just at the moment. So he's managed to join those two genres together, if you like. And in terms of, I read pretty much everything, to be honest. I don't really have a set list of books or genres that I enjoy. I'm just as happy reading a factual book as going into fantasy or anything else. The book I'm reading at the moment is the Philip Pullman's Book of Dust, for example, which is the second in his Secret Commonwealth series. He's obviously the one responsible for the first three, Amber Spyglass. What was it? I can't remember the other two. The Subtle Knife.
Northern Lights.
Northern Lights, that's right. And the thing I like about those sorts of books is if you're setting yourself into a more of a fantasy arena, then it really opens it out for you. You can do pretty much everything. And I think that's what I liked about science fiction, because you're not dealing with a little tiny town in a middle of the Highlands. You're dealing with the universe pretty much. So someone like, I guess my favorite author, Ian M. Banks, with his books. I mean, he obviously started with The Wasp Factory, which wasn't science fiction, of course. It was a fairly gothic tale, which raised a few eyebrows and got him established. But he also, as Ian M. Banks, wrote a huge number of science fiction books where he's created an entire universe. And it's just the scope and the breadth of his vision that I find really interesting.
So would you ever be tempted to cross genres and like write a sci-fi book?
Yes, I probably will. What I guess I don't want to do is get typecast as a crime author. Really, I've written one book before this, which no one was interested in publishing, and I think because it was how I termed it, a fairy tarte noir. So I've written about supernatural beings and sort of detectives and things, and it's just too out there at the moment, I think, for anyone to take on. And in some ways, that's what motivated me to write a straight crime novel, because by constraining myself within keeping things quite sensible, if you like, then that would rule out any reason for people not to like it. So in a way, it was a test for myself to see if I could write and if people were going to select a book based on what I'm doing as opposed to the style or the subject matter that I'm writing in. And crime was an ideal vehicle for me to try that. Hence Whirligig. And obviously I've just been blown away by the response to that. So in the future, yeah, I hope to do different things. The second crime book, as I say, is written. I'm almost 55,000 words into an environmental thriller, I think it's probably safe to say. So that'll be ready for people to have a look at by about April, I guess. And after that, who knows? One of the advantages of being a brand new author is it's pretty much up to me what I do. If I was very established as a crime author, then it gets very difficult to break out, I think, from that, unless you're someone like Galbraith, who can suddenly come up with a crime book and no one actually realizes you're who wrote Harry Potter. She did very well doing that.
You could publish under a different name.
Yeah, that is a possibility. Yeah, might do that.
Have you ever been tempted to self-publish your fairy tartan noir?
Well, I have, which I probably shouldn't say, but I did self-publish it, but I've taken it off. I've taken it off Amazon now because for various reasons of trying to get your second book published and everything, it gets in the way. I've been told. I have to. I have to bow down to people whose experience of the publishing world is much greater than mine, which would be pretty much anyone you meet in the street, I should think. So yeah, it's generally not advisable, I've been told, to self-publish if you want to be traditionally published. However, the corollary of that is that it's a bit of a chicken and egg. If you don't get published at all, you've got nothing else to do but self-publish. So I don't know. It's beyond me how you go about that. Some people are lucky, I guess, and find an agent and get published straight away. But I suspect the vast majority of authors or wannabe authors or scribblers or whatever, like myself, write something, pop it out there, and get a sea of rejections. So you either put it in a drawer or you self-publish, which is what I did. And I was just lucky that my second book was taken.
No, is lucky. So Steve Munoz, who he's read Whirligig.
Oh yes, I've seen. I've talked to him on Facebook. Hello, Steve.
Yeah, he says an environmental thriller sounds good, but so does something supernatural.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, I don't know. I'd quite like to resurrect my my fairy tartan noir. To be honest, as it's the very first book I've ever written, it's probably riddled through with things that I wouldn't do now. With the vast experience of one book under my belt, so I would like to re-release it. It was planned as a trilogy, and I would like to revisit that, but I'm kind of in the hands of an agent now, it appears. So we'll see what happens. Watch this space.
Well, much like Steve, I'm quite a fan of a hint of supernatural in my books, or just outright supernatural books. So yeah. You'd have some readers.
Yeah, well, I mean, my self-published book did sell quite well, actually. But the biggest problem, I think, with self-publishing as an unknown author is trying to get it out there. So because Whirligig was so well received, surprisingly well received, and because it was offered up for shortlisting for the McIlvanney and everything else, then I'm very lucky in that I've been raised quite high very quickly, and because of that, I have to try and build upon that and get myself established a bit in the author world. At which point, I think trying to do things that are perhaps a little bit unusual would become easier. Although I'm with you, I think there is a huge market for that sort of thing, for elements of the supernatural or mythological, and certainly there's a lot of authors who've made a very good living out of it. You just have to look at Game of Thrones, for example, as one example of someone who's obviously made an absolute fortune. It's a difficult one. There's a lot of publishers out there, I've found since sending stuff out, that if you mention you're writing anything to do with mythology or fairy stories or science fiction for that matter, they instantly close the door on you. So it's a difficult one. Maybe I'm going for the path of least resistance by bringing out a straight crime book as a subtle way of getting into something different.
Well, while we're on the discussion of your straight crime book, Samantha wants to know how you find the promotional aspect of writing.
The preparational aspect.
The promotional aspect.
Oh, the promotional aspect. It was very difficult because my book, Whirligig, came out just as lockdown occurred. So we had book signings and everything, and the launch all planned for, it was going to be Blackwell's in Edinburgh. That was all knocked on the head. The only thing I could do then was do an online launch. And I was probably one of the first people to do that because everyone else kind of delayed for a bit to see what would happen. And then there was kind of an avalanche of online events, including Bloody Scotland, of course, which ended up totally online back in September. So, yeah, I guess I was trailblazing there. How well that did, I don't know. I think I had, last time I looked, there were about 100 people had seen the YouTube launch, which is probably more than I'd have got sat in Blackwell's in Edinburgh, to be honest. So maybe it worked out well for me. I don't know. I suspect things are going to be different, even if the COVID situation does improve greatly and everyone gets inoculated, because so many festivals, including the Edinburgh Book Festival that you mentioned, have put themselves out online, and instead of having a reach of I don't know, several thousand or whatever, you've got a worldwide audience, and they did very well, I think, out of people all around the world watching and commenting and essentially taking part remotely. So although I think you can't replace the intimacy of a launch inside a venue and have people there chatting backwards and forwards and all the rest of it, I think that will probably continue, but I think it will also continue in tandem with it all going online as well. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it will give a much wider audience to authors and books. Don't know. We'll see.
I think we've had sort of feedback within our group that certainly allows members who are sort of in other countries to access seeing their favourite authors in a way that they maybe wouldn't be able to.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword, isn't it? It's got advantages as well.
Yeah. So Steve wants to know, he says, what about your writing process? What makes you follow up on one idea, such as in Whirligig? Do you spend the bulk of your day writing, or a dedicated period of time, research done before or during the writing?
Yeah, I'm probably going to upset an awful lot of people here. So I apologize before I start. My writing process, certainly for Whirligig, was to sit at a typewriter, sit at my computer keyboard, and start typing. And what I typed was the prologue, which is basically describing this tree in a lonely glen with a strange clockwork mechanism in the branches. And then I sat back and looked at that and I thought, well, that's interesting. What's that all about? And that kind of inspires me then to write the story. There's kind of two major ways, as far as I know, of going about writing a novel. This is a very broad brush thing, but there seem to be a group of authors who plan it out in meticulous detail, and they have whiteboards or they cover the wall with stick-its or whatever. Know exactly what's going to happen when and what happens and who did it before you even start. And then there's people like me who every page is of great interest because I honestly don't know what's going to happen next, who it's going to happen to, or why it even happened. And Whirligig was written exactly in that fashion. And I think I must have got almost halfway through the book, if not certainly over a third of the way, but probably about half the way through the book before I had a clue as to what was going on. And the amazing thing is that no one seems to be able to pick up on that. So I think I might be wrong, but I think it's Lynn Anderson is someone else who writes that way. I probably got that totally wrong. I was at a book festival and someone was saying they wrote in that way, which I found astonishing at the time because I'd never written anything then. This was a couple of years ago, and I thought, how could anyone write like that? But I find it great because it keeps you interested. I think if I knew how a story went from the very first page to the end, I don't think I could be bothered writing it. It would just be too boring for words. I need that edge of the seat stuff myself to keep me motivated. So yeah, that's what works for me. But yeah, everyone's different.
I'm going to echo what Sam said here, and I've interviewed quite a few people, and always the people who write really intricate, beautifully written plots that are, you wonder, you think they must have plotted that because it's so interesting and different, that are the ones who are like, no, I just sit down and write it.
Yeah, it's a very strange alchemy, isn't it? I don't know. I mean, the first, my sort of fairy book that I wrote, the comments I got back from that were it was so intricately plotted with so many storylines going on, and how did you manage to wrap it all up at the end? And the honest answer is I don't know. It could well be luck. I might find one book I'm writing, or I get 3/4 of the way through and think, I just don't know how I'm going to make all these things make any sense. Maybe that will happen to me. Maybe there's going to be a drawer full of manuscripts that never see the light of day. But so far, so good. I tend to sleep on a story if I'm writing it. The last thing I think of when I'm tucked up in my bed is where I am with the plot, and I guess my subconscious, hopefully, works away on it overnight, and in the morning I think, oh, I know, I think this is what happens next, and maybe there's a clockwork mechanism inside my head that does all this. I don't know.
So what about the rest of Steve's question? How about your research? Do you do that before you start?
Well, no.
As you're going?
I literally started the book. I didn't even know it was going to be clockwork mechanisms, really. I just described this thing in the tree. Didn't know what it was all about. So I did a little bit of research then, because I needed to know a little bit more about clocks than I did. But it's just searching Google and Wikipedia and such like. If I'm trying to describe a place that I can't actually physically visit because of COVID, I find Google Maps is brilliant. You can drop your cursor on a point on the map, drag your little man, and have a look around you and describe things quite accurately if you so wish. So yeah, I found a lot of COVID workarounds, but that was really the only research for that book. There really wasn't much else. I'm sorry.
Did you not do any research into like police procedures or anything?
No, I'm afraid not. So there's probably huge gaping holes. In fact, I'm surprised no one's actually been on to me, because I notice I notice in a lot of the Twitter feeds or Facebook feeds, people start jumping up and down because if two policemen were at such and such, they wouldn't have used a form B54. They'd have used a form C27 or such like. Yeah, okay. I'm sure there's gaping flaws in a lot of the procedure, but maybe not. I don't know. No one's complained about it yet. I probably just opened the floodgates actually, so I might turn Twitter off for a bit. But I try not to get too into that. I mean, there's authors aplenty out there who know the intricacies of police procedure. They've either been police themselves or they've been involved in it or heavily researched it. And yeah, that brings an awful lot to a story, I think. I try to avoid that level of detail where I can, for two reasons. The first, most obvious one is I don't actually know a huge amount. I kind of extrapolate from the little I do know and assume this happens and that happens. And the other reason is that I really don't find it very interesting. I'm more interested, as I said earlier, in a sense of place and the sort of psychological motivation behind people, both the police and the criminals and everyone else that comes into the equation, much more than I would be on following an exact and correct procedural sequence.
I mean, Whirligigs, it's a fantastic book, so I don't think...
Thank you very much.
I didn't notice any errors.
No. Well, I probably skirted it well enough that I didn't have to.
Steve wants to know how much of real life or real events influence your writing.
Yeah, that's maybe overly perceptive of him. I think we all write from a well of experience in some form or other. I mean, I've not had any dealings with people trying to kill me by clockwork or any of the rest of it, so I can't lay any sort of claim to that. But yeah, I think, you know, going through life, you experience all sorts of events and highs and lows, and as is often said, real life is a lot weirder than fiction. And I dare say that I have a fairly deep well of experiences that I do dig into and use in my writing.
Nice. Samantha wants to know what's in your glass. And she said, I've got no fabulous mug. I do have a mug tonight, actually. Look.
This is Lafroig. So, cheers.
Nice. My dad would approve. He loves their single malt.
Absolutely. Just trying to fix my throat. I didn't have time to do my vocal exercises.
He swears by that as well. It's his tried and tested cure for everything.
Well, yeah. I haven't caught COVID yet, touch wood. So maybe that's the answer. It's certainly preferable to inject yourself with bleach. But hey, we're not getting political.
There's a question here that says, do you have a favourite relationship within Whirligig?
Yeah, I quite like them all, really. James Christoffin, the DI. I mean, I particularly like him because he's a bit of a plodder. He's not the brightest tool in the box. He kind of gets there purely by stint of hard graft and plodding through it. And I quite like that. You know, the opposite to that, I don't know, the Poirot or something, or Sherlock Holmes, who can wander into a room where someone's been killed, and he says, "We're looking for a 37-year-old Balkan miner or something, because he's left these, I don't know, he's left this ash here, and that's from the Balkans, or yeah, he has all these amazing intuitive leaps and spots all these amazing things that everyone else misses. That sort of detective, I really don't. I don't really relate to. I think maybe it's a reflection back on myself, and that I'm possibly a bit of a plodder myself. I don't necessarily leap to things instantly. I mean, it's taken me this long to write a book, for example. So yeah, I'm a fairly slow sort of guy, I guess, and in that regard, I can relate to Christoffin quite well. I also quite like the way that his assistant Frankie Mackenzie is seen as not being very bright either, but in fact she's kind of streets ahead of him. and she kind of, a lot of the leaps in the case really come about via her hard work, really. Apart from that, I think, I don't know, PC Lamb is good for his comedic value. I think even a fairly dark story is always better if it's tempered with a little bit of humour. So, for example, I don't know if you've seen The Bridge that was on a few years back, Nordic drama. That had, although it had very dark subject matter, with a body found right at the middle of the bridge between Sweden and goodness me, is it Denmark? I don't know. Showing myself up, but they found out it was two different bodies, so that each side of the border, which was the middle of the bridge, had a totally different half of a body on it, which is, yeah, it's pretty dark to start with. But the whole thing was very nicely tempered, with the woman detective having how can I put it, social difficulties in how she dealt with life and people and stuff, which wasn't funny in itself, but it lent a lot of obvious humour to the whole proceedings. So I much prefer to read a book, which can be as dark as you like, but I think if you don't put a little bit of lightness in there, all you're left with is darkness, and I don't think that's healthy. So yeah, there's three of them I like.
You're not shy of a bit of darkness, or gore. What is there anything you wouldn't write about?
I'm not keen on writing about females being raped, dismembered, all that sort of thing. There seems to be, in my view anyway, there seems to be an awful lot of books that basically rely on misogyny as subject matter and exploitation, and all the rest of it. And I personally feel uncomfortable with that. I wouldn't, I'd try and avoid writing about that. I guess I sailed slightly close to the wind with that with Whirligig. I mean, the root subject matter, which I think I'm safe to say at this stage is child abuse, is dark, certainly, but it's not. It's never really described. It's never really used as to titillate the reader in any shape or form. It's referred to as opposed to ever written about. And again, Margot in the book, the gamekeeper's bidey in, as we say up here, she's abused. She's he knocks her about and all the rest of it. I mean, you know, you can't escape the reality of life. There's no real point in writing a book set in the modern day if you purposefully avoid all that subject matter that's out there. But I think you can avoid being gratuitous. So maybe I'll just leave it there. I'll try and avoid, if I can, writing gratuitously.
Fair enough. Samantha wonders how long Whirligig took to get from the first word to first draft.
Again, I'm going to probably upset an awful lot of people. I wrote it in a very part-time way because I had a full-time job, so I didn't have a lot of time. In about 6 months, the publisher wanted me to change one murder, basically, and I changed that in the space of about 10 days, and that was the only rewrite that occurred. I think there might have been a couple of punctuation points, and that was it. So yeah, it went pretty much from computer to being published, pretty much.
Did you always want to write a book?
When I was in my early 20s, I fancied myself as a writer, and I started writing a book, which was a science fiction book. And I probably got to about 1,000 words when, even as a callow 20-year-old, I realized this was absolutely awful. And I didn't even think about writing until literally a couple of years ago. It just never occurred to me. I mean, my background was in engineering. I've never done a writer's course. My English stopped at O level. As far as I was concerned, I had none of the qualifications to be a writer, medicinal, excuse me. But I think it was Christmas 3 years ago, I think, where I sat down at my computer, and Christmas, Boxing Day had gone. Hogmanay was around the corner, and it's that funny little sort of doldrums bit you get, where you don't really know what to do with yourself, and you've eaten too much, and the television's goddamn awful, and everyone's kind of entertaining themselves with new presents or books or whatever. So I sat down and I started writing, and that was the sort of fairy tale noir gizmo that I wrote. And I did a prologue to that. I thought, well, this is very interesting, because it starts with Thomas the Rhymer, who comes from the 13th century Scottish borders, who was a seer, who was able to predict the future, who was meant to have been taken away by the fairies. He's arrived in the modern day, and he's dancing on Ranach Moor, which is a sort of big area of wilderness, not too far from here, a bit further north, and it's where the last ice age started, that covered the UK. And I thought, what is this character doing? Why is he dancing here on a very treacherous, boggy surface? And in a similar way to Whirligig, really, that inspired me to continue his story. But when I started writing, I didn't know if it was any good at all. I haven't written for since I must have been, I don't know, an O-level class in English when I was 14 or something. I've written nothing creatively since then. So I had no idea if it's any good at all. I showed it to my wife, who is a fierce critic of mine, which I think is an essential. If you're going to write, get someone that is going to tell you the truth. And she quite liked it. So that kind of inspired me, and I've really not looked back. Now I'm afraid I've got the writing bug, and I'm just going to churn them out, and hopefully people like them.
Well, you're off to a good start.
Yeah, well, yeah, I can't complain. Yeah, because I've literally come from nowhere. I don't think anyone would have put any money on Whirligig getting anywhere. So yeah, good start, as you say.
Yeah, well, like we've covered it, it did very well, and no, it was a well-deserved shortlisted
Thank you.
book. Sam says, in your fairly brief time as an author so far, what moments have stood out for you?
Well, those are fairly self-evident, really. The first one is getting published. Yes. Like anyone that's starting out in publishing, in writing, I don't think you really believe unless you're Donald Trump, you don't really believe you're good enough in anything you're doing, and you kind of put your baby out there, and hope that it doesn't get thrown out with its bathwater by everyone that meets it. So it was ignored or rejected by, I don't know, half a dozen agents, publishers, weren't the least bit interested. But I had Claire Kane from Fledgling Press, who jumped on a train from Edinburgh to Dunblane and signed me up basically there and then. So I don't know. Maybe Fledgling Press is very astute, and she saw the potential in it before, certainly I did, and certainly before anyone else that looked at it did. And of course, it was them that put me forward for the prizes. So yeah, long listed for the one and shortlisted for the other. Was astonishing. So yeah, those all stood out, and thank God they did, because 2020 was a bit of a sterile and horrendous year. So to have a couple of things like that certainly put a spring in my step and lightened the whole year for me.
Sam also says, have you been sent or shown any pictures of Whirligig out in the wild?
Very few. I've not. I've seen one myself. I went to back in the summer when things relaxed a wee bit. I went to the Watermill bookshop at Aberfeldy, but everyone was masked up, one person allowed in at a time, sort of thing. So it wasn't the most inviting atmosphere. Nothing to do with the bookshop. It's just how things are. But I wandered in case they had it, and it was actually being displayed right on the end of a shelf, cover out. So I took a photo. I was very pleased. And my son has seen it in a bookshop in Edinburgh and took a photo for me. So yeah, I've not seen it in the wild, which is, it's a big regret, really, because I don't know. It's not really ego massaging, but it's a real delight, I think, if you've got a book published, to be able to go into a bookshop and see it sitting on a shelf along with all these other amazing authors. It's quite unreal, to be honest. And I've missed out on that because of because of COVID. But undaunted, I'll just write a few more, and hopefully things pick up, and I'll see myself out on the shelf again. But yeah, it's the whole experience of getting published and getting my book out there has been quite unreal. I mean, I'm under no illusions. I know how difficult it is for anyone trying to get a book published. It's a nightmare, basically. It's really hard. But don't give up. I think I'm very lucky to get mine as well received as it has been as the first book. But please, just if you've got a book in you, write it. And if no one wants to publish it, you can always go on Amazon and self-publish it. And maybe someone will pick it up and say, this is what we need for our TV series. Offer them £1 million. You never know. Give it a try, because the alternative is to leave it in a drawer and gathering dust. And go with it. That's my advice. Just have a go at it.
Do you sell signed copies of your books?
Well, again,
so if someone got in contact with you, could you?
Yeah, I could do. Again, the COVID thing has kind of made that very difficult. I think I've had 2 signed copies out there so far. So maybe they're very valuable. I suspect not, but yeah, if anyone wants a signed copy, I'm more delighted to do so. I think probably the way around that is to contact Fledgling Press directly, and they can send me a book over, and I'll sign it. I'll wear my rubber gloves and my mask, and we'll get it sent off to you. I assume that's fine. There's probably a proviso about sending abroad now, because for reasons I don't have to go into, that the price seems to have gone rocketing up for any international transactions. So I would raise a cautionary air with that. But yeah, from my point of view, I'm delighted that anyone's interested enough to have a signed copy. I'd love to.
Wonderful. Do you have a dream location to hold a future launch party?
Anywhere the public's allowed in at the moment. A dream location. I don't know. I'm very fond of Blackwell's in Edinburgh. It's just got such a great it's in such a great position. But yeah, I really don't mind. I've not really thought about it, to be honest. My head's full of COVID lockdown thoughts and things at the moment, so it's not something I've explored. But yeah, now you've mentioned it, I'll start thinking of the ideal launch location.
You need to. And maybe like future book tours. Are you planning to be involved in any like literary festivals this year?
Well, again, that's up to the literary festivals. I'd love to. I'd love to be involved. The only involvement I've had with literary festivals is as a punter in the audience. Although I did write a factual guide to ceilidh dancing 4 years ago, I think, which was published by Lewis Press. 100 favourite ceilidh dances, if you're looking for it. And that was, I actually had to give a talk there at the Edinburgh Festival, book festival for that. So I have done one book festival already. That was a bit of a surprise because I remember that Lewis asked if I'd do a launch or a talk about it. And I said, let me think about it, because I thought, basically, what the hell can you talk about 100 ceilidh, 100 ceilidh dances? Difficult to rabbit on about that for too long. So I went to the festival anyway, because I attend it just as a punter. And it was myself, my wife, and my daughter, and we were in the queue to the Lewis tent to see the other authors he's got talking. And my daughter pointed out, I think it was my daughter, said, "Dad, what's your face doing on that poster?" And I looked at the poster, and the queue I was in for the talk was actually being given by myself. So yeah. So if a book festival needs me to talk at very short notice indeed, a bit like this event tonight, it's in my skill set, evidently. So there you go. I ended up talking about the sky cudgel dance, I remember, which isn't in the book for health and safety reasons, but where you hit each other over the head with a cudgel until blood goes over the eyebrow of your opponent, and then you've won. And what the music is, no one knows, but I always felt a waltz would fit that quite well. So yeah, there you go.
Excellent. I've learned something about ceilidh dancing.
Well,
I knew it was a good idea of inviting you on.
Maybe I have to write another 100.
Yeah, maybe. So that sounds like something out of a Terry Pratchett book.
Yeah, it is a bit. Yeah, maybe there's more in common with myself and Terry Pratchett than I ever imagined, but there you go.
We've got a couple of minutes left. Do you want to just give everyone another reminder, give a bit more of an advert for Whirligig?
Yeah, absolutely. This is the book. It's called Whirligig. It's written by myself, Andrew James Greig. It's available from all good booksellers. I know it's on Waterstones. I've seen it on their online thing. Toppings as well, I think, and Amazon, of course, if they ever pay their taxes. So yeah, all the usual places, or you can buy it from Fledgling Press directly, I believe, still. So yeah, it's out there still, being sitting on shelves. So yeah, please do buy it. If you enjoy it, let me know.
Is there an audio version of it?
Unfortunately not. It's because Fledgling's a small publisher, they don't as of yet do audiobooks. So yeah, it's something certainly that I've looked at doing, but I don't think my voice would last an entire book. It's difficult enough making it last for an hour-long chat with yourself without medicinal help. And if I used that amount of medicinal help reading the entire book, I'd be incomprehensible by the end.
You could take it in stages.
I could do. That's true. Yeah. Well, it's. I hope to have an audiobook out. So yeah, watch this space.
Try a different medicinal help every time.
That's right. I should be sponsored by them, really, shouldn't I? I'll talk to Freud.
Yeah,
see if they'll sponsor you. A bottle a year, that would do me.
Thanks so much for joining us.
I was glad to be able to step in at the last minute, and yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure.